Imagine a rectangular loggia bordered by 3 columns on 4, supporting only a terrace. The loggia is approximately 9 meters long, 6 meters wide, and 3 meters high. The men in the foreground are located about 8 meters from Christ's column. The men themselves do not escape a rigorous system of perspective. Piero applied to them the rules that he would describe in detail in his treatise on perspective. As he did in all his work, he portrayed every position of the face and body in order to give variation to the scene and increase individual effect. Profile, full face, 3/4, back. Their eyes are large and transparent. Fabrics have a tactile presence, whether it be the iridescent cloak of the bearded man or the turban worn by the man in white. To his already complex system of perspective, Piero added a curious combination of light sources. The sun is rather high, but not yet at its zenith. It shines from left to right. The paved street and the tribunal are oriented exactly east-west because the shadow of the entablature is parallel to the border of the loggia. West is in front of the viewer. In back, the livelier color of the pavement shows that the building stops and that between it and the palace in the background is an avenue or a square located just about in the sun's axis. The shift of the sunlight in relationship to the plane of the painting has an exact scenographic function. It allows Piero to light the column at left, the entablature, and the palace in the background. If the rays of light were parallel to the plane of the painting, all these surfaces would be much darker and the composition less balanced. This lighting has an historical and geographic reality. The sun is high because it's the beginning of spring in the northern hemisphere. Even the date can be determined. According to Christian tradition, the Passion of Christ occurred on March 25th. The sun isn't yet at its zenith because the time of the scene is approximately mid-morning. Because the sun is lighting the parts of the buildings that face the viewer, the interior of the loggia must have appeared darker. Pilate is lit from the front, and the steps of his stairway are lit from the right, that is to say, the north. This light could come from the reflection of sunlight on a building located to the right, outside the line of vision. But in this case, it would also light part of the street. The top part of one of the torturer's feet is lit at the same time as the underside of the idol's arm. Thus, light for the former is coming from above, and for the latter, from below. In the row of columns, the second column is in shadow, but the third is fully lit. The fourth also is in shadow. Thus, the light is coming from an area between the second and third columns. And, in effect, the central coffer of the ceiling is brightly lit, whereas the other two are less bright. The bays project clean shadows that also are geometric clues to help localize the source of light. The light is located nearer the second column than the third, slightly above the torturer's hand. It's punctual light because the shadows are clean. This is directional light, and Piero marked its edge at the foot of the colonnade. The source of light acts as a modern theater projector or a movie projector equipped with a reflector. Certainly, no device as powerful or precise existed at the time, but Piero could have imagined it from models lit by candles with reflectors, or possibly from having been inspired by ancient writings on optics. This source, devised in the most rational way, is there to show an irrational light, mystical, the light of God. But yet there is a third source of light in the painting, the one that lights the stairway. The stairway is one of the instruments of the Passion of Christ, a holy relic. Thus it also could be lit by divine light, this time coming from above. But this sudden light may also have another explanation. Above the tribunal, there could be a flat terrace into which the stairway opens and that borders a building with galleries and large bays open to sunlight. The vanishing point is located very near the floor of the loggia, which signifies that if the scene had been real, it could only have been painted by an artist seated at the level of the pavement or standing on a plane at a lower level. The same is true for the viewer. The painting cannot be hung very high as a religious picture in a church because the perspective would become unclear. Nor can it be hung too low for the same reason. It must be hung with the horizontal line a little higher than eye level, which supposes a private destination, such as the wall of an apartment or a small oratory. Piero was attentive to all sorts of other details stemming from this logic of vision. For example, behind the face of the bearded man, there's a window whose inside shutter is closed. If this shutter were open, there would be a black hole there, and at some distance, the viewer would have the impression that the man has a strange, long, black beard. However, the other shutter remains open. That allowed Piero to use a very thin line of black to edge the man's neck. Thus, from a distance, the neck's color is not confused with that of the shutter. The same principle is true for the face of the man at right. If the shutter were open, the viewer would have the impression that this man is wearing a kind of black ribbon. Here again, a thin black band edges his neck. In the opening of the door in the background, Piero shows some steps. The stairway is parallel to the plane of the painting, thus it's possible to draw it using the ceiling height as the uppermost limit. This reconstitution gives a stairway of 28 steps. That's precisely the number of degrees of the Scala Santa at St. John Lateran. For the palace located in the background, Piero provided several clues. Half of an arc of a window with a rounded vault and a portion of a second window. From a lower level, Piero shows a pilaster and an entablature identical to those of the upper level, but more elevated. Thus, it's necessary to deduce that the facade is composed of arcades and portals, each corresponding to a pair of windows.